All right. Today we're just going to go over this next quiz, and I'll answer questions. It's going to be kind of a short meeting. It's only going to be about an hour. Excuse me. And whatever other questions you have, or since you're the first person here, you'll have priority. So whatever questions you have, we'll cover, and whatever else you can email me, and we'll go over it on Thursday's meeting too. I'm really sorry about last week's mess up. I talked to one of the tech guys. They walked me through what was going on, and I found out what the problem was. And everybody should have the rest of the term. They should show all of our Teams meeting in on their calendars now. So hopefully there won't be that same kind of confusion. Now, Kenya, have you already done your annotated bibliography?
No, I haven't yet.
Okay. I was going to say I've been really impressed with what I've seen. People have really been doing a really good job on that. If you have any questions about that, please let me know, and I'm happy to answer them as well. Or you can just email them to me.
Okay.
See, the first code word of the day is noodle. All right. I'm going to do screen share, and we'll go over the quiz. And I ask questions of everybody as we go through the quiz. So if you can pretend to be different people when you respond, that'd be awesome, and it'd make it feel like there were more folks present. I am kind of joking.
Okay.
Let's see. All right. Can you see this?
Yeah.
Okay. This project that we're working on is called Structure with Skin. What if you go through the research and look at the artists, one of the commonalities that you'll see is that they work really hard to find that balance between revealing the support and also showing the outside surface of whatever it is that they're doing. Now, we talk about structure and skin. When you think of something like the Eiffel Tower, is that primarily structure or skin?
Structure?
Yeah, absolutely. All you see are the struts, isn't it? That's like that's the hallmark of the building. That's what everybody thinks about. But if you think of a building like the Statue of Liberty, is that structure or skin, primarily structure or skin?
I would say that one is skin.
Yeah, absolutely. And so how the whole point of this module is how as an artist do you find that balance between those two, where you can show the structure and get people invested in the structure, and you can show the skin and get people invested in that. This quiz, we're going to be talking about things like negative space, scale, and then the last question will be talking about that structure and skin idea. And we're not going to wrestle with too much issues of scale in this class because I don't think we're set up for anybody to do any monumental works. But these are things that I want everybody to be aware of as you go through the module and go through the quiz. You know, really think about them and how they can apply in other work that you do. Now, the first question, we're looking at Adam Thomas's My Better Half, Opposites Attract, and we're talking about delineated forms. Now, if we talk about delineated shapes in a painting, that's pretty obvious. It's anything with an outline. How is that different when we go to three-dimensional space? How are forms delineated when you're looking at a sculpture? And I think Kenya, since you're the only one here, if you pause for like more than a half a minute, then I'll take that as you're fed up answering for now. We'll go to and I'll answer. But with your experience already doing 3D work in Jason's class, from your experience, can you describe what delineated forms are and where you see a couple of them in this sculpture?
Um, I don't. I'm not sure, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like one of the forms would be like the circle of the shape overall. I don't know, like it's not like an outline, but
No, but you're right. It is. That's two of the main delineated forms of the circles, and they are outlined by the wood of the ladders. So yeah, you're exactly right. In 3D space, when we're talking about delineated forms, are basically any forms that are given definition by either an obvious outline or an implied outline. And sometimes the outline can be as simple as maybe the artist made an edge that light will reflect on. So we see like a white reflective line. Some of the other delineated forms in this are those rectangles that are in between the rungs of the ladders, because the rungs and the sides of the ladders make delineated forms in addition to those circles that you saw. And I would say that you could probably even argue that the tiles on the floor are delineated forms because even though they're flat, they do have those outlines going around them. But I would say that those are the two main ones: the rectangles from the rungs of the ladder, and those two circles that you mentioned. So excellent. And so that's all you put in for your answer right there. Now identify the two most common rigid materials artists and sculptors use in constructing artworks. What we're looking at with the text, it talks about basically from not necessarily the dawn of time, but the dawn of surviving evidence. So the things that we have evidence of that artists use as rigid materials from history. So if we look at that and look at these, we can eliminate three of them almost immediately. First two we can eliminate is metal and plastic, because plastic has only been around in the last relative short amount of time. I think the last century and a half, maybe at the most. And again, plastic and stone. So we can eliminate those two. So if we look historically, what rigid materials between these two have people used? Well, glass, as far as we know, the use of glass in art was invented by Egyptians in their glazing. That's the oldest evidence of glass and glazing. And then in three-dimensional work, it's the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians are the first ones to start working with molten glass. But we know that people used materials well before the Phoenicians did. And so this one is eliminated as well. So if we eliminate those three, can you give the answer as to what are the two most common rigid materials?
metal and wood.
Absolutely. So yes, excellent. Very good. Now this one is interesting because we're trying to actually put together a fiber arts class for the future. But fiber arts can be made durable in outdoor conditions by adding a hardening compound. This is absolutely true. And this has been true from a very long time ago, as our ancestors would start putting things like pitch and sap and tar onto things that they wove to make, for example, tents. And we know that tents fit into the realm of architecture, and architecture is 3D art as well. So we can call them artists as well. But this is absolutely true. Fiber arts can be made durable in outdoor conditions by adding a hardening compound. Very true. Now here's one that, rather than making you answer, I'm going to talk about just a little bit. This one says, identify the negative space or spaces in large reclining figure. As I think on Thursday, one of the things I'm going to do is watch with everybody a video that I really like on our channel. If you go to the Tools of Artistic Critique portion of our channel, there is an smart history video where two art historians talk about another Henry Moore sculpture, just like this. And they talk about negative space a lot. Positive space, of course, is everything that you make. So this structure, the knee kind of thing, this odd shape with the two pointy bits, this and the head, these are all positive shapes. But when we start talking about negative space, the artist is also very aware of what he, she, they are not making. They're very aware of how air moves around the object and how the background shows around the object as well. So Henry Moore on this piece, the negative space would be, well, here's a little bit of negative space right here at the head, where you see that it almost looks like something is cloven into the head. That's negative space, and it's designed specifically to call your attention to that area. So even though you pay attention to the head itself, subconsciously you're drawn to it because of the dynamic shape of that negative space. Negative space also is under these arms right here. So we can feel, with the negative space there, we can kind of feel the, not etherealness, but the slenderness of these arms. Because suddenly if this was all a flat slab, this might still read as a person on some level, but it would be very monolithic and look very strong. By removing these areas so we can see under the armpits, Henry Moore is inviting us to be a little bit more engaged with this object and is not quite so imposing. The arms feel slender, even though they still form the function of supporting this weight. And then this is kind of a dramatic negative space as well. Under this thing that almost looks like a distorted foot and leg, the knee is emphasized and the foot is emphasized. Knee is emphasized because of this negative space underneath it, and the foot is emphasized because of this negative space right there. I don't know exactly what these are, but they could very easily read as things like toes and a heel. So I'm going to ask you a question now, Kenya. I talked about negative space under the arms and the head right there, under the knee and under the foot. Can you see anywhere else where there might be negative space?
Did you mention like on this, like on the middle part, like the body, how there's like that triangle kind of taken out on the side?
Right here? No, I
Yeah.
didn't. So yeah, very good. But with that triangle being taken out, what does it force you to think about?
I don't know. It forces me to think about why.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think the artist is trying to give you an answer, but it attracted your attention, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes that is the primary reason why an artist will do that, just to get you to start thinking. So yeah, excellent, very good. Now, one thing to consider, so first, for this answer, write a sentence about the negative space, like you just did. Second, think about what the piece would be like if the negative space was not there or was filled in. And we just mentioned that a little bit. With this plane that has the elbows and those arms, if there was no negative space there, it would just feel like a big white block. And that's it. And I think also if there's no negative space, it doesn't do like what you just did. It doesn't attract your attention to it. So think about those and when you write your answer. So excellent. Now, what is forced perspective and when would an artist use it? I'm going to answer this one. In one sentence, forced perspective essentially is anything you do to force the viewer to perceive something the way you want it to be perceived. Like, for example, Michelangelo's statue of David, it uses forced perspective. It's actually larger proportionately at the top than it is at the bottom. But by the forced perspective that he uses, if you're standing at the base, David looks like everything is in perfect proportion. Now, some other examples might be, say an artist wants you to think that they're making a corridor, and like for set design, one thing that they will do is make the floor slant up and they make progressively smaller doorways that you can see through. So because you assume all the doorways are the same size, it makes on the set design it look like there's a long hallway. And it's forced perspective just like you would do in your drawing. And an artist will use it to add drama, to engage the viewer, to make the situation pleasing, like in Michelangelo's use in the David sculpture, just makes it beautiful and pleasing. And sometimes they will also, many times artists will use forced perspective in a 3D environment, like stage design, to make it feel like there's more space than there actually is. Now this is a good one. Question number 6. There's 3 different sculptures, and the answer is basically, with 2 sentences, talk about which of these you feel activates the space the most or the most effectively, and why. Now there isn't a correct answer. You get full points if you're able to defend whatever answer you come up with. One of the interesting things I've seen is letter B, with this sculpture here by Brian Draper. Somebody said it activated space because it engages you psychologically. It makes you feel like a person wants to interact with you because you can identify that this is a human being and the human being is reaching out. And so that's how they said that activated space. For this one, Lit Match by Mark DeSivero, one person said it activated space because it felt like it was on the verge of leaning over. And another person said it activated space because the lines were so dramatic and they felt like it was pushing against the air or stabbing into the air. I like those. And on C, Untitled by Tom Friedman, this thing is 3 feet tall and it's all made with little 2-inch toothpicks, and I think it's astounding. And it reminds me of kind of a really odd coral type structure. But one person said this was the best at activating space because the toothpicks reached out and it felt like it was an explosion just caught in a moment of time. So you could feel the toothpicks pushing against the air as they rushed out. And I think all 3 of those are totally valid perspectives. And the point is, on question 6, just spend about 2 sentences to explain why whichever one of these 3 you chose really activates space. Does that make sense? Or rather, Kenya, do you have any questions about this one?
No, that makes sense.
Okay. All right, good. So again, not a right answer. You get full points when you're able to explain why the answer you made is good for you. Okay, now here's one. In as few words as possible, give one reason why wax is most often cast into another material. You only have to give one reason, and there are a few that are listed in the book. I'm going to give you a couple. One is when we use the lost wax technique, wax is ridiculously easy to carve. It can be very soft and malleable, and being ridiculously easy to carve makes it so you can get a lot of detail in it. And then when you cast in another material, since that other material will fill in wherever the wax was, all that detail is transferred. So that's one reason. Another reason is wax is ridiculously cheap compared to, can you imagine how expensive it would be if you had to get out all your metal cutting tools and carve directly into a block of bronze or something like that? It would be ridiculous. So wax is incredibly cheap. A third reason is with wax's low melting point, it makes it so that you can make a cast of it in say ceramic or clay even, and fire it up, and the wax will all melt out, and the clay will harden, and then giving you a really good cavity that you can pour another metal into or another material into. So that's 3 reasons. First is it's easy to work with, very soft. Second one is it's incredibly cheap. And third one is it has a low melting point. So all three of those work, but you only have to list one. Okay, now here's one. This material has one of the highest plasticity ratings of all the materials we're talking about. Uh, Kenya, do you know what, in this context, what plasticity refers to?
I don't think I do.
Okay. Uh, in this context, plasticity, we're talking about how easy it is to shape, how forgiving it is. For example, material that you can't really squish at all or change the shape while you try to push against it, like wood, doesn't have a super high plasticity rating. Now you can bend and shape wood, but it's something that would have a higher plasticity rating would be something like wax that we just talked about, because the it is easy to move and bend and push around. But the other aspect of plasticity is forgiveness. Can you push it back in on itself? Can you stretch it a little bit? And wax may not have all the same qualities as something like clay does. Clay is incredibly easy to work with from this perspective. And the answer here for question 8 is one of the materials that our ancestors have used pretty much since the dawn of technology, which is clay. So clay has one of the highest plasticity ratings. So again, the answer for question 8 out of the textbook is clay. Now, in your sculptural work, have you ever had a call to use an armature?
One time making like a bust,
All
and
right,
we had
why did you have to use an armature for that?
um well, I think partially for support, but also so that it was like hollow on the inside too. I don't know.
Okay, I think that that's valid. An armature is primarily, like what you said, that first reason. It's for support. And if you're making a bust out of clay and you want to fire it, sometimes you really got to make sure that it is hollow. But the armature itself primarily is like what you just said. It's for support. Um, so a sentence would be, for example, if I'm working with clay, I would use an armature inside just to make sure that the clay maintained its shape while I was finishing my piece. That would be an excellent one. Another one would be uh, doing stop motion animation. Armature is used for the clay pieces to hold them in their different positions um, as the animation progresses. So that's another one. Either way. Let's see. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit sidetracked. It looks like somebody tried to get into the meeting that wasn't able to. Okay. All right. It looks like Shelby is joined. And if Shelby, if you did make it in, would you go ahead and type something in the chat box to let us know? Yeah. Okay. Going back to the quiz. Uh, so I think, Kenya, what you just said is excellent. And then if anybody does animation, Kubo and the Two Strings is one of the best examples of armature stop motion animation around. So, and so all of those are, both of those are valid. Now, this question number 10, people have gotten a little bit confused about it. But as we go through, you probably recognize some of these artists. Ron Muick from that list, um, Dwayne Hansen from the list, and then Slinkachu. And out of the three of these, I really kind of enjoy Slinkachu's sense of humor the most. I think he had the best. He has the best sense of humor. But what we're talking about, this question, it deals with scale. And to get the full points on this question, what I need you to think about is think about scale only, not content, but think about scale and how scale in each of these three pieces forces a specific kind of interaction or perspective from the viewer. And what we're looking for is one sentence on the baby and how this monumental scale affects the viewer. Sentence number 2 will be this piece, Man on a Bench, and how this scale affects the viewer. And sentence number 3 will be Glory by Slinkachu and how this affects the viewer. You know, what is the scale? So an example sentence would be, in the girl, the scale being used is monumental. And this, babies are born thousands of times every single day. And a lot of the times we forget what a miracle it is. And by this artist making an ordinary baby monumental scale forces us to confront the idea that this truly is a miracle. And it is a little intimidating. So that's the first sentence. Second sentence, Man on a Bench is ordinary figurative scale where the person is life-sized. And he's very realistic. This does a couple things. This makes me feel kind of disturbed because the person has since it's a sculpture that looks like a person, there's absolutely no interactivity, and that's kind of unnerving. But also, it feels weirdly approachable because this is identifiable as a person, and he's the same size as I am. So he's not intimidating at all. So that's an example of sentence number 2. An example of sentence number 3 is Slinkachu likes working in this miniature scale in just regular, ordinary urban settings. But the miniature scale, at first it's intriguing, but then it forces you to engage with it more and more tightly as you try to focus in and see what's really going on. And it forces an engagement with you because of the tiny scale, but also it allows you to engage because you feel somehow protected a little bit. So it's okay to look at it because you're so much bigger. All right, so those are I'm not saying any of those are right or wrong, but they're just examples of how this question needs to be answered. So again, one sentence for each, and in that sentence, you'll first describe the scale, and second, how that scale affects how a viewer interacts with it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. All right, now this is another one, just like, remember up here, we looked at this one, where I said that there's no right answer. You just pick one, and then in a couple sentences describe why you feel that way. Now again, this one at the very end, this is the last question. Anthony Gormley's Angel of the North, there is not a right answer. And all you need to do, though, is whichever answer you decide to give, justify it and describe why you feel that way. And people have answered this with, they say that the skin is the most important. People have answered that the structure is the most important. And then other people have also given a short answer as to both. They say, well, I don't think I can pick one or the other because they're both important. The structure is important for these reasons, and the skin is important for these reasons. So, and all you need to do is write 2 sentences about it. And an example of this is, I feel that the skin is the most important because Angel of the North really has a very dramatic silhouette to it. Without the skin being there, the silhouette would look kind of creepy because it would just look like bones. So that's an example of one. Another example would be, I think the structure is the most important. The structure plays with the light around it by casting shadows, but it also makes for a very dynamic interaction with the background. If the skin wasn't there, you would still be able to see what the shape of the Angel of the North is, and you would see how it interacts with the landscape more. So either one of those answers is perfectly fine. Now, does that make sense to you as well?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Very good. Okay, I'm going to turn off the screen share. All right, Abby, you've joined us as well. That's 3 people. Excellent. So we've got Shelby. And our second code word is angel. For everybody that's not watching us live. So we've got Shelby, Kenya, and Abby. You're here. Excellent. Very good. Um, Shelby, if you have any comments or anything like that, go ahead and type them in. Uh, I don't know why, but sometimes, especially when you're on Teams meetings where, for me, it's whenever I'm on a Teams meeting where I'm required to interact, that's when the microphone dies. And I think the computer knows that it's being inconvenient. So no problems. If you have any questions or anything like that, just type it in. Now, as we move forward, this week we're working on the structure with the skin. And before Thursday, I would like everybody to go through that artist research and watch a few of those. At the very least, watch the Frank Gehry video, and I'm hoping that you can watch all of them. And it would be ideal if you watched all of those before you even started on the building the project. A couple other things I've noticed is I'm really impressed with the carvings people have been doing with the foam and doing the paper mache stuff and painting. I mean, those things have been turning out pretty freaking amazing. I mean, that's very, very cool stuff. And another thing I've been noticing is the people that have been doing or the annotated bibliographies. You guys have been doing an exceptional job on those. Very impressive. And a couple people didn't know quite what direction to go, so they sent me partially finished. Okay, I'm sorry, my computer fritzed a bit and it kicked me out of the meeting. I was in the middle of just complimenting everybody. Now, next week, we're going to be doing another project, and I'm still kind of finishing up the description for that. We're going to be working with tiles, and we're going to be working with texture and color as well. One of the things that we're going to be doing is a collage where you'll just make like little teeny tiles like that. You'll just make collages that demonstrate different ways the colors interact with each other. And these are designed to be 10 minutes a piece at the most, but I would recommend getting just a couple cheap magazines. Dollar Store has a lot of really, well, obviously they're dollar magazines, but you can pick up a couple of those, snatch them from roommates when they're not watching. I'm sorry, I never condone stealing. Make sure that you ask them and get a positive answer. Or magazines in the back of the closet, whatever. You can, but I would also recommend going to Lowe's, Home Depot, Walmart, any place that has a paint department, because it would be really easy to get. They have design cards there that show different, that have lots of pictures of different things with different color schemes, but they also have the paint chips. And I would just go look look at what kind of stuff they have, what kind of stuff they have for free. Try not to load up on everything, but then because then they will kick all of our students out of those kinds of stores. But just pretend that you're building a mansion and get as much as you can comfortably feel like you can grab from those stores, from the free places. I would recommend maybe grabbing some from one place, going to another store, grabbing some from them, and doing it that way, so that people don't think you're or so you don't take all you need from just one site. We're also going to be doing something called a senses walk or a senses journey, And that involves, since we're dealing with texture, I want people to be really aware of the texture that we see around us all the time. And what you're going to do is just spend 5 to 15 minutes walking around, trying or journeying around, depending on what mode you use. And if you need to be, if you're not very mobile, this might be best if you did it in a cart or a wheelchair rather than a car. But ideally, I would want you to do this outside. And if you can't do it outside, then do it in any environment that you can. But the point is to pay as much attention as you possibly can to the physicality of your surroundings. By that I mean really focus on, for example, the texture of the carpet, the glossiness of the paint, the beading in the wainscoting, the textural quality of the textiles, the glossiness of the wood, or the graininess of the wood, or maybe you're looking at leaves, and there you notice something you never noticed before, that there, with the different trees in the area that you're in, each of them have a completely different texture quality. So use your senses as much as possible just to explore, to help you explore the environment. This is a really good meditation as well for when you get really stressed about things, but I think it's valuable as we go into this next module just to really feel the environment. Now, I mentioned at the beginning that I do have to leave a little bit early because I have another meeting that I have to get to in about 15 minutes or so. And we will talk about these things again on Thursday. I got all caught up with grading this weekend, and then everybody did a flurry of activity, and I'm all behind again. So I will try to get caught up in the next couple of days. Shelby, is your microphone working again? The reason I ask is that the ring around your name keeps flashing like the microphone is starting working. But we'll talk about that more on Thursday, these next modules. I wanted to know if anybody had any questions about the annotated bibliography, and I believe I also released the PowerPoint. Let's see. I believe I also released the PowerPoint module. Yes, I did. Does anybody have questions about either one of those? With the PowerPoint, well, let's do, you know what, let's do that as our third code word. We'll just say PowerPoint. The annotated bibliography, as you go through that, think about your own identifiers, how the artist is different from you, and how their work really resonated with you and why you picked them. You don't have to say anything specifically about that in the annotated bibliography, but I want that to be in the back of your mind as you're writing those annotations. You know, what about these different projects or articles really drew you in and were fascinating to you? I'm getting some really good responses about that, so keep it up. With the PowerPoint, what I would like you to do is, and this is what I was trying to describe, the importance of the annotated bibliography, is use that directly to inform your PowerPoint. And one way you can do the PowerPoint is go through your annotated bibliography, decide which order you would like to present these. Maybe one of the articles talks a little bit, the artist talks a little bit about how their background influenced their art and kind of led them to do different projects. And maybe that would be a good one to begin with. One example is Anatsui, one of his beautiful wall type pieces is made from lacing together milk can lids. And he just talks about one day he was walking along and saw this bag of garbage that he opened up and found all these milk can lids. And he thought, what can I do with these? You know, maybe that would be a good beginning slide. And maybe in the middle, talk about some of the uh, different activities that the artist is involved in. For example, specifically about the process, maybe how that informs how their living situation informs what they do, how the country they're in informs what they do, and maybe wind up with just a careful discussion about a couple of their pieces and why they really resonated with you. Look on the channel at a couple of the reports that people have done before for help. And I would think that I think a really good one would be, for example, the first slide would have the artist's name, maybe a picture of the artist, and a couple small images of work that they've done. And you would say like something like, the artist that I chose is such and such. I really appreciate them because, and then list 4 or 5 qualities about that artist that are completely different from you. And you don't have to explain why they're different, and you don't have to explain why you pick, pardon me, why you pick those qualities. Just in that first slide, explain or describe some of the qualities about the artist that makes them different from you. Second slide, say, give a brief overview of how the artist got to where they are. Say Dahosu or Dohosa is from a family of artists, moved to New York, did this and that, and that's how he got started as an artist. Third slide would be something along the lines of, this is some of the artist's early work, and you can kind of see a common voice developing, and refer to your annotated bibliography citation addressing that. Maybe the next couple of slides you just talk about, I would prefer if you didn't read your annotated bibliography, but pick a slide from each of those citations and show that, and then just kind of express why those citations were important to you. You don't have to describe the citation, just show the slide and talk about it. And then maybe you would show a piece or two that you really like and describe why you like them. And then your last slide would just be, thanks for joining me, and here's the citations. And your last slide just has the citations on there. And that would be great. Now what I'm describing is more than 8 slides, but if you want to do all that and you keep it under 8 or 10 minutes, then that would be great. Some of the issues that I've seen people fall into is when they, like I do, they get carried away speaking too fast. Then the time passes too quickly. And you may want to do a dry run before you actually record yourself, just to make sure that the time is appropriate. Then another issue I've seen is, it's a really good idea to keep bullet points down. If you're going to use bullet points, don't use more than like 3 if you can avoid it. 5 maybe at the max. But people before have fallen into the trap of just putting every bullet point they can think of up. And it's because everything they want to talk about is important. In that case, I would just pick 3 bullet points and have your notes in front of you and talk about all the other ones, but only have those 3 on the slide. And I'm really looking forward to hearing what everybody has to say about why you pick that artist, how they're different from you, and how their art really resonates with you. Do I have any questions from anybody? Is this making sense? Or do you need any clarification? And if you don't have a question for me now, that's fine, because on Thursday you can ask me then, and that'll be totally fine. So any questions about this? A couple people have asked me, really worried about due dates, and I wanted to reiterate that can any of you remember what I said about due dates um, in the first video, and then also like last week?
Didn't you say it was just kind of a guide and that everything was due at the end of the semester?
Yes, absolutely. Several people have gotten really concerned because they're falling a little bit behind, and the reality is life is something that you live in, and it doesn't always go as exactly as you planned. So exactly what Abby said, everything is due at the end of the term, and if you are really concerned about that, the end of the term is on June 25th. If you are really concerned about that, talk to me, because we can always find a way to help you to get the work done that you need to get done. And I don't dock points for being late, because even though we do have the due dates there, it's just like Abby said, it's to help you to keep track of your own stuff, and it's not so I can ding you. That may change for other classes, but generally this class, everybody's been pretty cool, so we're going to keep it that way. Now, do we have any other questions about the quiz that we just talked about, or any of the modules? One of the things I thought was really interesting about the styrofoam carving, is that I had published an old version, and then I updated it. Jason and I worked through it. I updated it and republished it, and people were still seeing the old version, and which talks about carving in wood and everything like this, which is not what we're doing. The only way, if that happens on any of these modules, feel free to email me right away. But if you're confused about it, doesn't click with what we talked about in class, one thing that I have noticed is that sometimes if you just refresh Canvas, it works. Sometimes it doesn't. In that case, if the modules aren't changing when you do the refresh on Canvas, I would recommend exiting out completely and then getting back in again. Every time you do that, Canvas is supposed to reset, and that should allow you to see the most recently of each of the modules and everything else. Now, I would like to I'm sorry, I got distracted. I was gonna say something really profound, evidently, and I completely spaced it. But if you guys are confident that you know what's going on with this structure with skin thing, what I really like you to do is watch those videos in the module, particularly the video about Frank Gehry. And we're going to talk about that on Thursday. And on Thursday, we're also going to talk about applying um, the tools of artistic critique to somebody else's work. Because what we need to do is start doing that, and what you will use, or the way that you'll do this when you start doing your critiques, is I just want you to find an image of, you're going to do two critiques. One is going to be on your own work for this class, and one is going to be on somebody else's work from this class. The easiest way to do this is to um, set up your computer or your phone so it just records your voice showing an image, and show the image of the artwork that you're going to critique, your work that you did in this class or somebody else's, and then just have that sheet or that page that shows what the 4 steps are in front of you, and go through and answer at least 2 questions on each of those 4 steps during the critique. You'll record it. It's going to take about 3 minutes, and then you'll send that file to me, and I'll put it up on the channel. And we will do some demos in class as well. So we're going to talk about that. And I'll say also that the first person that does a critique of their own work, first person that does critique of somebody else's work, and the first person that gets their um, PowerPoint presentation done for their artist research, all three of those you'll get extra credit. So the first people done for each of those three things, you'll get extra credit. Another question that I've gotten a couple times is somebody said, one of the questions is, well, I already did this exercise in another class. Can I count that? And the answer is no. The department has me cover a specific range of material, a specific set of ideas, and you will only get credit for the work that you do for this class in this class. It's really tempting to there are other situations where other work will count, and that'll be just fine. But for this class specifically, the only stuff you get credit for is the work that you do in this class for this class. All right. Now I'm gonna leave in about 2 minutes. Do we have any last questions or anything? Shelby, can you type in an observation just so we know you're still there? Well, it looks like I can see the light flashing, so I know you're present. It just no interactivity. I imagine that must be frustrating. All right. Well, we're going to meet on Thursday. If whatever questions you do have, please make sure to email me as soon as you can so I can get answer ready for you by Thursday, and let me know how you're doing with everything. I'm really impressed with how much everybody is doing, how quickly people are doing things. It's wonderful to see. So keep it up. Let me know if you have any questions, and I will see you guys Thursday at 8:30. All right? All right, we'll see you guys. Have a good week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And see you, Shelby and Abby and Kenya.